Okay, Google, studio lights on. That's excellent. Studio mics, do the show. Okay, they're not that smart, okay?
Yet.
Smart devices certainly make our life easier.
But security experts say there's a dark side to the technology. I'm Malika Bilal.
I'm Femi Okay. Today we ask the experts, what do our devices know about us?
What are your thoughts? Tweet us or leave a comment in our live YouTube chat, and you too can be in the stream.
Voice recognition has become commonplace for millions of people around the world who use the virtual assistants that come with our smartphones and speakers. And while these AI-powered helpers quietly listen for our commands, who else is on the other end?
Whistleblowers from Apple, Google, and Amazon claim workers regularly listen to personal conversations, like those between a doctor and patient, as well as sexual encounters and even criminal acts.
Should we be concerned? And if so, how do we protect ourselves? Joining us to discuss this in San Francisco, California writer, futurist, and technology leader Alex Salkiva.
In San Diego, California, Sam Jadali. He's a cybersecurity researcher. And in New York, Lily Hay Newman. She's a reporter at Wired focusing on information security, digital privacy, and hacking. Welcome, everyone.
It's good to have you here. Lily, let's start with you. If you have a device that has a microphone on it, should we assume that it is listening to us, or is that just being paranoid?
Yeah, it's not specifically that the device is always listening. What's happened with these revelations is that it turns out that in some cases, snippets of your audio were being reviewed by real people, third-party reviewers who were transcribing the information and trying to check whether the digital systems were getting the right information out of your requests to the device. So it's not an all the time listening, but it's maybe more of a human component than users realized.
Sam, have you got any idea what that might look like? Is it a whole office full of people with headphones in, listening to me trying to put my shopping list together?
It very well could be. You know, Google was discovered to have been subcontracting out for its Google assistants, and there was a Flemish news agency that reported on these contractors reading or listening and transcribing these Google voice calls. And so there could be quite a number, and we actually are we don't know how many there are, and we're unable to quantify it.
So one might be asking, then why would anyone use these devices? In full disclosure, I love my Alexa. I don't use Google Home or Siri, though, and all of those are what people are talking about. So here is one, Heath, on Twitter, who uses these devices. He says, I use them for timers, calendars, reminders, news updates, trivia games, general knowledge questions, phone calls, smart home control, weather reports, the list goes on and on. He says, privacy is less an issue with these devices than functionality. I actually want these AI systems to become more conversational and less robotic. Asking Google Home for a search is no different to me than typing it into a browser window when it comes to privacy. Alex, what do you make of that last part of Heath's comment there?
Heath's comment is absolutely correct. I mean, a voice input is the same as a text input from a machine standpoint. And so all of this information that we're handing over to companies like Google or Apple, Facebook, Amazon, it's all being reduced to bits. And the question is, how comfortable are we sharing that information? Heath obviously has no problem with it. And I think most people, frankly, shouldn't have a problem with letting Siri know that they want to know what the weather is or that they want to play their playlist. I think where you run into the margins, which is what Sam alluded to, is what if there's really sensitive stuff in these conversations and we are assuming that these systems aren't listening when in fact they are. And some of you have probably had some scary instances where, for example, maybe you were Googling something about a medical condition and then ads might show up in your Gmail, which allude to the fact that they know that you're doing this. Well, the same thing is in play in voice systems as well.
Let's just explain very simply how one of these voice command systems actually work. So let's look at the Amazon Echo, and very basic diagram, really easy to understand. Have a look.
In order to improve voice recognition artificial intelligence, you need a massive data set on literally everything someone might say to their phone. When you speak to an Alexa device, all of that data is stored and kept in the cloud. That means Amazon can do more to study that data and help the system learn your habits and interests, so it can better guess what you might search in the future.
Lily, what's some of the great things that come out of the device? Is actually listening to us, we talk to it, it records it, helps us out. Can you go for a couple of the stories that you know where these devices have really been helpful in people's lives?
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I always talk to people about when they are thinking, well, should I use one of these devices or not? I think it comes back to a sort of risk assessment or cost-benefit analysis for each person. For me, I don't usually use these devices or smart assistants, things like that, because I don't find that it's much more useful to me than typing something into my phone or choosing when I want to receive information through a device like a laptop. But other people, if they have mobility issues, if they're new parents, if lots of things could be going on where it's not that easy to get to a device or even get to a light switch, something like that, where just being able to speak a command is a massive quality of life improvement over doing some of these daily tasks. So in the case where you're getting a huge benefit out of it in your daily life, I think there's a potential, like that commenter was talking about, that to say, well, the trade-off is worth it to me. Maybe there's a privacy risk, but on the other hand, I'm getting this enormous benefit. For me as an individual user personally, I don't find that trade-off makes sense for me right now. But I think if you're thinking about it that way, you'll be in a better position regardless of what happens next. If something were to happen to your data or something and you were getting a lot out of the device, you would feel better about that than if it was really out of left field and you've never considered it.
So
I mean, I tend
ahead.
to think about it. I agree with Lily, but I also tend to think about it a little differently. First point is that whether it's useful or not, that's a sort of a personal decision. And for many people, it'll be incredibly useful. And for some people, they might be scared about the security just by giving up their information. What I feel is really the issue is that they're not telling you that they're doing this in the background. And I think a lot of cases, if they just told you, if they just let you know that, hey, we're doing this, it would really alleviate a lot of these other concerns. A second point, which I think both Lily and Sam know about as well, too, is that like that clip that talked about massive data systems or massive amounts of data needing to train AI. That's not true anymore. They can actually train AI very effectively on much smaller data sets than they could even 2 or 3 years ago. You see this with, for example, some of the research on solving CAPTCHAs. And so I think that's almost a false choice. They don't need the same amount of data. And you also see some systems like opt-in, where, for example, Mozilla, the open source organization, has a project called Common Voice, where they have people opting in to donate their voice under conditions where the personal identification is obscured, and it allows them to create an AI trainable corpus that anybody can use that's not necessarily dominated by big tech companies.
Alex, I think that's such an interesting point you made, first of all, in that the users are not immediately told. They don't always know that this is happening and then what is happening with that data. I wanted to share a video comment we got from a staff writer covering technology at The Atlantic. His name is Sydney, and here's his take on that point.
More and more of these products are coming into our lives, and we're figuring out way later, way after the fact, how they actually work, and whether or not we want them. And so what is happening right now with all these different scandals, quote unquote, we're learning how it works. The debt is coming due in terms of how these products actually affect our lives. One of the things I think we should ask is, if we had known this debt was coming, if we had known how these products actually work, would we have bought them in the first place? As it relates to intellectual debt, the debt is growing. We're buying more of these products, and because the products are becoming more sophisticated, what we're risking is eventually these products will know more about us than we know about them.
Sam, what do you make about his point on the debt? And if we had known, would we have bought the products? Although, again, full disclosure, I knew it would be a bit creepy to have a microphone in my home, and yet the utility is worth it for me. But what do you think?
I mean, I think Sydney is absolutely right. I mean, we have billions of devices connected to the internet. We have our digital companions, Alexa, Siri, Google Home, which they're now embedded into, appliances and home speakers and even cars. And so, it's becoming, so ubiquitous. And right now we have this reactionary approach to data privacy. When something is breached, then we end up looking at all the laws and the rules and seeing, okay, well, what happened and how do we rectify it? But we should be addressing these beforehand. So I think that's what's really missing at this point right now.
One of the reasons, guess, we're talking about this, excuse me, Alex, just one moment. Just the peg for this story is one is that some of our audience wanted to hear about what are our devices listening to. The other one is this. Google admits partners leaked more than 1,000 private conversations with Google Assistant. So there are real data issues here. Alex, go ahead. What were you going to say?
So I was going to say 2 points. The first part, to Sam's point, this has been an afterthought. It's been reactionary, and I think that for the most part, people don't really care about their privacy until they realize something bad has happened. It's almost like a car insurance. You don't care, you have it until after you crash. And I think that the tech companies probably could have done a better job of creating interfaces and ways for us to understand the implications. And I think that's part of their job because they are making money off our privacy. Make no mistake about that. The second piece is that I ask people to put this in perspective when I talk to them, which is that compared to what happened with the Equifax leak, for example, where in the US at least, over 100 million people's very intimate financial data was essentially leaked or stolen, this is really small potatoes. And I think that very often we get worked up about, someone's listening in on maybe some slightly personal stuff where the whole world has your most detailed financial information and it's sold on the dark web for cents per record.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree that it's sort of small potatoes because of the point that people don't really understand what they're buying and there isn't transparency from the tech companies about what is happening to the data. So yeah, in theory, a social security number is a lot more sensitive than what you're saying to your Amazon Echo or whatever it might be. But in practice, if people don't know what they're buying and they don't understand that there's an exposure there, a potential exposure, and they're giving these devices as gifts to all their family members at a holiday or a birthday or something like that, then it's just propagating more and more, and people aren't really aware of, maybe they could be saying their social security number out loud to their spouse in their home, not realizing that they also said the wake word and it's being captured. So I definitely think there's a major problem there that isn't easy
Lily,
to resolve.
To the uninitiated, the wake word, tell everybody what the wake word is. It's like having a safe word.
Oh, right.
Which then gets me down into another hole, but
right.
Tell me what the wake word is.
Part of that research.
Sam, hold tight. Let's hear what the wake word is for people who don't have an Amazon Echo. Go ahead.
Right. These devices aren't actually listening to you all the time. They're only listening when you say a word to wake them up so that they start listening and that's a privacy protection that was put in place. So it's not so creepy to have something that's always on. But one of the concerns with these devices has been that sometimes the device thinks it hears the wake word when it actually didn't. And that's a lot of the issue that's happened with the snippets of audio being someone committing a crime, doing an intimate act, something like that. They're not intending for the device to be listening in that moment, but it misinterpreted something as the wake word. So that's kind of another area of this that's important to understand.
Alex?
Yeah, that's complete.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
So Sam, before you jump in there, then I will, because I wanted to share this from YouTube. Elizabeth writes in that this listening and data collecting turns people and their data into the products, which feels a bit too 1984 for me. So it's that point that I want to pivot off of, because we just got this tweet from Courtney, who says, my privacy concerns are more about third-party sharing than what Amazon collects. I don't care if they record me for product improvement. I do care if they sell that data. And I care about my data being stored indefinitely. So I think this is the crucial point for a lot of people. Sam, talk to us about who this data gets sold to, who wants it, who are these third-party organizations?
And that's a great question, and that's the problem itself, is we don't know who these third parties are, and the United States at least lacks any federal data privacy law that discloses or requires that transparency. And so luckily in the EU, you have the GDPR law, but right now we don't know, who they're sharing it with. And so, a lot of the times, as Lily alluded to, these companies, they may, collect or that have our data, our voices, but a lot of times, it extends beyond just these devices. It could be your apps and these or browser extensions or browser apps, and they can collect your pictures. They can collect your data about your DNA, your travel itineraries, and your personal documents, and then all of this may be captured by third parties, and so and be shared with other third parties. Go ahead, Alex.
And this really cuts to the core of the sort of the market mismatch in the digital economy, the way it's built. I mean, we are accustomed to getting lots of valuable things for free, and the way that money is recouped is they sell our information. It's transparent. It's not. It's completely opaque as to where it's sold and to how much the value of our information is. But in general, at least to date, we haven't been necessarily willing to pay for things once we've been exposed to using them for free. So I think that this is almost like an original sin of the digital economy, going way back to the early days of the internet.
But we are paying for our voice command devices. We are paying good money for them. We're paying money to use them. So it's
upfront, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So then there should be some built-in security into that. I'm just curious, Sam, when these new devices are brought out, is there a process in the testing stage where they think, okay, what are the ethical issues that we need to examine? Or does that just happen later after the breach has happened?
Companies like Amazon, Google, and Facebook, they do take these into consideration. They're working on it, but we need more stringent, safeguards. And so, they may not be looking at the whole economy and is, selling their data to somebody else. We don't know what that third party is doing with our data. So they may tell us and say, okay, we gave it to company Y, but who is company Y sharing that with? And so there's all these degrees of separation that we don't really know about. And all of those really need to be looked into and explored more.
And this is where I think it comes back to the utility for each individual, because, a company, I do think that all the companies take pains to at least make their devices not seem creepy, but that's because they want to sell more devices. Even if they mean well, or that, they don't mean anyone ill, their ultimate goal is just to sell the devices. So I think it comes back to what an individual is getting out of it, and not just trying to sort of have something that's trendy or cool, because it is going to be opaque what they're doing with these things. The question is, are we as consumers getting value from them? Because otherwise you're just sort of giving them your money and all your data and everything. You really need to be thinking about what you're getting back in deciding what you use.
Here's someone who would agree with you. This is Alan, and Alan on Twitter says, ideally people would get a fuller understanding of how these devices work and all the possible things that can happen with the recordings of their voice before deciding to purchase. Companies have made this difficult, though, in my opinion, because they know these details may hurt sales. So exactly what you were saying there. But I want to play a video comment from someone else who's echoing an idea we brought up, but really honing in on it. This is Sarah Freer. She's a tech reporter at Bloomberg, and here's her take.
Companies need to be honest about the fact that when we give them data for artificial intelligence purposes, it's not just machines looking at that data. Often it's humans who are parsing through it, transcribing it, cataloging it, testing the computer's efficiency and accuracy. And if we don't know what's happening with our data, we can't make appropriate decisions for our own privacy. It's very important that they disclose to us exactly what stage they're in with the artificial intelligence and exactly how much human involvement there will be in achieving what we ask the product to do.
So Alex, she wants disclosure. What do you think that we as consumers need to be doing to ensure our privacy is protected?
So Kevin Kelly talks a bit about that sometimes. He's kind of a well-known thinker on this, and the need for some kind of artificial intelligence agent that actually represents us. Because frankly, if we were to receive disclosures every time that our data was being used in an AI system, all we would do all day long would be receive disclosures and try to read disclosures. That's how pervasive the systems are. So I think that it's really an issue where, yes, we should be told, but there has to be a better way for us to gain control, first of all, at the inception of whether we want to participate. Second of all, to have understandings or maybe red flag that, hey, this is something that your interests may be violated or you may concern you a bit, because just the idea of like policing all our data totally impossible.
Probably the best example of what could possibly happen to our data is from a PR company that doesn't exist anymore called Cambridge Analytica in the UK, and how they used potential voters' data and what happened there. Let me just remind you, have a look.
In 2015, the political consulting firm Cambridge Analytica gained access to data from more than 50 million Facebook users for political advertising purposes. The data suggested what kind of advertisement would most likely persuade a particular person in a particular location for some political event. Information from Cambridge Analytica was leveraged to influence political events around the world, including the 2016 US presidential election and the 2016 Brexit vote. Tech companies are just getting sharper at collecting and using information about us. And while the long-term consequences and potential misuse of so much personal data collection remains largely unknown, we don't seem to be limiting the data we leave behind.
Sam, I'm just thinking, I wonder if we actually even care as consumers, because every time that we sign on to an app or a device, it gives us a whole list of options. If we say no, it closes, we can't use it. So we go, okay then, and then we sign off on it. I'm wondering whose responsibility is it to make sure that our data stays safe?
It's a little bit of it works on both ends. So the companies, obviously need to be transparent. They need to offer explicit consent. And then we, as users of the internet and these devices, we need to be able to read, all this data, and we need to be able to be informed. We need to understand what we're doing, and we need to be educated most of all. And so, I think that it would be better, perhaps, if these companies provided us, with the periodic intervals of, our data privacy choices, so that at least we know what's going on. A lot of the times we inadvertently accept these data privacy choices, and we don't know, what they're doing with our data. And so I think the more users can be informed, the more users can be educated, the better decisions we can make overall.
What I find fascinating... Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I was just smiling because first of all, New York Times has done some really good research, and Lily's probably read this too, on how difficult it is to read terms of service that are required to sign up for these systems, and often the reading levels require almost a college education. Second, I think we've been socialized to such a degree that we just don't pay any attention, that actually some researchers at, I think it was York University, included in a fake social network app that they were testing out. In the final term was, you assign to us the rights to your firstborn child. And something like 98% of the people
said yes. Oh, man. Malika.
Yeah, well, and I think that the onus is not on users. It should not be on users, who are just trying to live their lives, do for their families, things like that. Like it shouldn't be required that we.
So Lily, I've got a quick question for you. Alex has Siri, Sam has Siri. You have nothing. I am wondering what you know that the rest of us don't know. Does it just all creep you out?
Well, what I was going to say was it's not a sort of big deal to me in my life with these particular things. And what I was going to say is there's a lot of places, like all the third-party data sharing on social networks and things like that, where it's just impossible for users to keep track of it all. And I really do think the onus should be on the tech companies or third parties or regulators or whoever you think
not the user. It shouldn't be our responsibility.
But when it comes to something like smart assistants, something like a potentially live mic in your house, it's creepy. It's a little bit creepy. So that's like low-hanging fruit.
It's a little bit creepy. Last words from Lily. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Alex. That sums up the conversation nicely. Thank you very much. Malika.
So I'll end with this from Emre, who pitched the idea for today's show after seeing a show that we did on facial recognition. And Emre says, I don't think the impact of technology is discussed as much as it should be. As such, my suggestion is the impact of speech recognition tech and data privacy issues it may bring. So Emre, we hope that we did this topic justice for you.
Alex and Sam and Lily, thanks for being with us today. You can always find Malika and myself always online at AJ Stream on Twitter. See you next time. Thanks for watching.